Right guys, I've got a big one for you today. Cathie Wood has just sat down and laid out exactly why she's positioned ARK in the way she has, and her answer on Nvidia might surprise you. She gives her up-to-date take on Tesla, her take on the GPU to ASIC shift, and then we have a bonus clip from her at the end where she says which stocks she's focusing on now. And then in clip number 2, we have Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, who's describing Microsoft's vision for AI in the workplace. And I think it tells us something important about where the real money is going in this AI cycle. The tech we're on the cusp of is profound.
You know, it sounds to me like you're suggesting that you think that several of the hyperscalers are simply spending too much, and that the return on that invested capital is going to be lower than maybe some investors think. Now, if they are spending too much, they're spending it on chips from Nvidia, which you have a much smaller position today than you had just a few years ago. Do you regret selling as much of Nvidia as you did, which by most accounts cost you more than $1 billion?
So that's taking a look at what that sale did, all other things equal. But what did we put that cash into? We put it into companies like Palantir, which I think since that time has done better than Nvidia, like Coinbase, which was under SEC attack at the time, very opportunistic. And so was it even, Stephen? I don't know, probably not 100%, but I think we landed on some of the names that were really going to take off based on, again, what the new news was going to be. And we do think, if you look at our big ideas, you'll see one section where we show that GPUs generally are going to come up against the competition, more competition in and of themselves. We're seeing the hyperscalers moving towards developing their own chips. We're seeing more specialized chips. Certainly Tesla is moving in that direction. And we think ASICs are going to take share from GPUs. So, you know, I don't regret it. You'll see in our top 10 in ARKK, out of recognition that we believe this AI cycle is still in early days. AMD is in our top 10. And of course, the shocking thing there is it's doing very well in GPUs, especially for small language models, relative to Nvidia, that is. Not as well in large language models, but the shocking thing there also is that it's taken huge share from Intel, up to 40% of the CPU market right now, which, you know, I grew up as it was fighting for 10, 15%. So, and then the other thing with AMD is much less memory required with AMD's chips, just the way they've constructed them. So again, there are lots of puts and takes here.
Yeah, Broadcom too, right? You like Broadcom today more than Nvidia? Is that fair to say?
Well, Broadcom is a smaller position in the portfolio, and you're right, we've started building it. And it is because it will probably be one of the prime beneficiaries of the shift from GPUs to ASICs. Now, over time, I have steered away from Broadcom because it has been a consolidator. I'm not, as an investor personally, not attracted to growth by acquisition, and Broadcom has been acquisition prone. We do think, though, that the ASIC world is going to grow fast enough where it won't need to make acquisitions in the future.
Tesla is your largest holding, 10% weighting. The stock's done nothing over the past 12 months. Why?
Well, I do think there's a bit of a tug of war between the bulls and the bears. That's always the case. It has been, if you look at it from a basing point of view, it's been in a base, it's a wide base, but for about 5 years. And I remember, I think it was on your show, Scott, one time I made the point that Wow, this has been a very long base. I think back then it was 6 years. Now we've had 5 years. We're at the top, near the top of that range. And we do think robotaxis are going to break it out. And we think that as more analysts do the modeling and see that we're now talking about a company with 15% gross margins, but robotaxis, recurring revenue model, software as a service kind of model, 85% margins for that kind of business. We think that more and more analysts are going to understand how profound this model is going to change.
So ARK's portfolio moves reveals a thesis that the AI investment cycle is shifting from infrastructure build out to the application layer, companies that actually generate the returns. So Cathie's being pretty direct here about why she trimmed Nvidia and rotated into names like Coinbase and Palantir. And I think the reasoning is sound, even if you could argue with the timing. The hyperscalers are building their own chips. Google's been doing it for years with TPUs, and Amazon has Terranium. And if all this jargon on what the different chips are, TPUs, ASICs, Amazon's Terranium, I break this all down in the AI course I made thinking about myself before I knew anything on AI. So it's basically the course I wish I had when I first started researching into AI, and it covers all this stuff. If you join now, you get lifetime access, and the price only goes up as we add new modules, which we're thinking of doing soon. Microsoft's also working on chips, and Tesla's also got their own silicon for inference. When you're running models at massive scale, the economics of custom ASICs starts to look really compelling compared to general purpose GPUs. That's why Cathie likes Broadcom here. They're the picks and shovels play for the custom chip build out. But the Tesla call is where I think Cathie is most differentiated from other institutional investors. She's talking about a 15% gross margin car business transforming into a 70, 80, 85% gross margin robo-taxi software business, which isn't a small shift in a business model. It changes how you have to value the entire company. And she's right that most analysts still haven't done the math on what recurring revenue autonomy looks like. Dan Ives has been beating this drum for months, calling for a 70 to 75% global robo-taxi market share, and institutional skepticism is still pretty high. I was getting a little bit of deja vu when Cathie was talking about the stock. She's framing around base building. Tesla's been range bound, which basically means the stock has hardly moved. It's just been up and down in a sideways motion for years. And Cathie's essentially saying the stock is coiled, waiting for a big catalyst. That catalyst is unsupervised autonomy at scale. We've seen the videos from Austin, cars driving with nobody in them. The question isn't whether the technology works anymore. The question is how fast it scales and whether regulators can keep up. Texas is letting Tesla move fast. California, a little bit here, but Europe, we're way slower. It's rather embarrassing. But once you prove it works in one market, the regulatory dominoes tend to fall. The broader point Cathie's making about the AI cycle is that we're moving from who has the best chips to who has the best applications. Nvidia's going to do fine selling to everyone who's building AI, but the outsized returns might come from the companies that actually deploy AI in ways that generate cash flow. Tesla, genomics companies, robotics plays, that's where ARK is placing its best. You can agree or disagree with the specific names, but the theory is that applications eventually matter more than infrastructure, and that has historically been correct in tech cycles. And that brings us to how the enterprise side is thinking about deploying all this AI. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella sat down with the all-in crew and explained Microsoft's vision for how knowledge workers actually will be using AI. Not chatbots, not copilots, but something more fundamental. And I think what he's describing is a template for how the next $1 trillion of AI value gets created.
In my estimation, 3 modalities for the knowledge workers. Elon's building at XAI what they're calling a human emulator, if you saw that leak this week, yeah? Where they're just building employees and just putting them into their chat rooms and email. Then you have Claude came out with co-work this week. Incredibly powerful. People are kind of losing their minds over it. I've been playing with it for the last 40 hours. Truly impressive. What's your vision for Microsoft and how knowledge workers will actually put this to use? Because there seems to be a gap between, you know, playing around with ChatGPT and getting some interesting results and getting business results.
Yeah, so I think one of the most perhaps illustrative examples of trying to understand these various form factors is looking at coding, which is obviously a form of knowledge work, or probably the best example of knowledge work. And if you think about the journey coding has been, it started with essentially the next edit suggest, right? That was the first time, in fact, my own belief in this entire generation of tech really sort of got formulated when I started seeing, I think it was, there's a codex model back in the day, it was pre-GPT 3.5. That's when next edit suggestions started working with some real accuracy. Then we went to chat, then we went to actions, and now to full autonomous agents. And then the autonomous agents can be both foreground, background, in the cloud, or local, right? So that's all the form factors that exist today when you're coding. And interestingly enough, if you look at it, you use all of them, right? It's not like there's only one form factor. So that's, I think, probably one of the other lessons. So for example, when I'm in a CLI, you go a foreground agent, background agent, and then just literally go edit in VS Code right there, all happening in parallel, right? So that sort of shows how these form factors even compose. So then you bring that to knowledge work, to your point. We started with chat. Chat with reasoning sort of goes beyond just request response, because you now have that chain of thought where you can see it work. Now there are actions, right? Essentially either through computer use or through basically skills and agent calls, so you can do actions. So that's kind of the state of the Copilot today. Now, there is a way to think about the theory of the mind evolution, right? Because you need, like, if you remember, Jobs had the best line, I would say, for PCs or computers was to say, it's a bicycle for the mind. Bill had a line which I liked as well, which was, it's information at your fingertips. We kind of need now a new concept, metaphor, for how we use computers in the AI age. And
you have one?
And the one I like actually came from the CEO of Notion, which I like, that manager of...
Incredible product.
Yeah.
You haven't bought it yet.
I've not bought that. But it's both management of, basically a manager of infinite minds. That's a nice way to think about it, right? When you sort of really look at all the agents that you are working with, you kind of need to understand in fact, the other term I like is we macro delegate and micro steer. In fact, you kind of need that. In coding, you kind of have it, right? So you do a macro delegation, and then I can in parallel give it instructions while it is doing work. So that's sort of the state even today of Copilot or what have you. You bring up a little bit of one of the form factors I'm very excited about, and you'll see us even in the next week even do things, is while I'm sitting in GitHub Copilot, it's not as if software developers sit in isolation, right? It's not like the only thing I work on is my repo. I attend meetings, I write specs, or others have written specs that I'm implementing. I need to have my repo be consistent with that. So that means using either a straightforward MCP server or a skill, I want to be able to call into my work IQ, which is the Copilot, bring that in. That's the type of composition of knowledge work that will happen. Same thing with security. Say you're a security professional, you have lots of logs. How do you sort of really analyze them? You drop them into a file system, then write code on top of it, create a dashboard, what have you. Those are the types of knowledge work that we can enable. Then I think you bring up one more thing, which is, can you create quote-unquote digital employees, digital co-workers, or what have you? And it's all about credentials, right? So today you can literally assign...
Are you working on that as well?
Yeah. So in fact, we introduced something called Agent 365 as a way to give identities. In fact, extending the identities we have for humans today.
The evolution from chat to autonomous agents and mirroring what happened in coding, and that pattern is about to reshape every knowledge work job over the next 3 to 5 years. So Sadia's using coding as a template here, and I think that's exactly right. We started with autocomplete, just suggesting the next line. Then we got chat inferences where you could ask questions, then tools that could take actions in your code base. Now we have fully autonomous agents that can run in the background, work on your repo, and come back with pull requests. That's a little bit of coding jargon there at the end, but it's basically changing these workflows and making engineers way more efficient. Cursor, Claude Code, GitHub, Copilot agents, they all do this now, And the key insight is that you use all of these form factors simultaneously. It's not like one replaces the other. You have the agent working in the background while you're editing in the foreground, while chat is helping you think through a problem. In fact, I even have some vibe coding running right now as I speak. That composition is what knowledge work is going to look like. The Notion CEO's framing was a manager of infinite minds. It's actually pretty useful for understanding this. You're not going to have one AI assistant. You're going to have dozens of AI agents, each specialized for different tasks, and your job becomes coordinating them. Sadia calls it macro delegate, micro steer. You have a big instruction, the agent starts working, and you course correct along the way. That's fundamentally different from the request response pattern of traditional chat interfaces. It's closer to managing a team than using a tool. Now I've got one bonus clip from you, which is Cathie revealing where she's focusing on in this market.
We are very focused on, more pure play future winners. I'm not saying the Mag 6 won't win. In many ways, they will. But they certainly, any company that is in the broad-based benchmarks and has risen to the top has gotten there because of past performance and a certain DNA that worked during the last 20 years or so. We think there's so much disruption happening now, technologically enabled disruption, some that will benefit, some that will not benefit the Mag 6. So we're much more focused on, the companies that are not as well known, but are going to benefit enormously from the year ahead and the years ahead. And I will say, last year, the market starting to broaden out away from the Mag 6. We outperformed. We're in the top 5%, I think, four of the top 5 ETFs by Morningstar. And even for the last 3 years, we're in the top 5%. So I think the market is beginning to understand what we've been trying to say for a long time now.